So our guest tonight is Dr. Steve Llano. He's an associate professor of communication studies at St. John's University. He's the author of How to Watch Presidential Debates Without Losing It, Making Rhetorical Lemonade from Political Lemons, printed in 2025. He teaches presidential debate, public speaking, debate practicum, and he lectures internationally on rhetoric and argumentation. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey guys. Hey, I should say long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah.
That's what I think I should say. I
Yeah.
really like the show, and it's great to be on here with the future governor and lieutenant governor of Maryland.
Yeah. And so, you were hanging out backstage. You got to hear a little bit of what we were talking about. Hope some of that resonates, and, we think we'll get into some of those themes tonight. And I'm just real excited to have you here. You and I have probably known each other for, I think, since the late 90s at this point.
Yeah. It must have been, because I came up to the University of Rochester in 2001, moved from my job as a high school teacher in Texas, and arrived in Rochester, New York at my new job on September 7th, 2001.
Okay, so
that was a crazy time to transition across the country, and I didn't know what was going to happen. Nobody did, but
yeah. So I was telling somebody the other day that you and I, coached college debate together in the late 90s, and they looked at me like I was very old.
Yeah.
I will, the next time I see them, I will tell them, actually not that old. It was the early 2000s.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Right on the cusp.
Right on the cusp.
All right. Well, you two have known each other for a long time, but for some of us who aren't as familiar or are more recently acquainted with your work, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work, and then also how you ended up writing a book about presidential debates.
Yeah, sure. So I live in New York. I don't live in New York City anymore, but my university, St. John's University, is in New York. I was born in Arkansas, grew up in Texas, and that's where I discovered debate, which led to me to the answer to all these questions here. I was in high school, and my high school debate coach, Patricia Sawyer, who actually lived a long life. She just passed away maybe like a year ago, was like, you have to do debate. And it was just her initiative that got me on this career path that I'm on today. I'm a rhetorician. I'm a rhetorical critic. What does that mean? Well, rhetoric is kind of a bad word. We hear a lot about empty rhetoric and heated rhetoric, and we've heard a lot in recent campaigns. The New York mayoral campaign, there's like, we got to tone down the rhetoric. It leads to violence. And so rhetoric's kind of a bad guy. But rhetoric for me is simply meaning making. How do we all look at the same text or the same symbol and come up with wildly different understandings of what it actually means? And that's kind of what I spend my time doing. Rhetorical criticism is the way we write and we do scholarship, which is where we take these moments of controversy and we say, how can all these meanings be derived? And they're not to find one that's more legitimate or illegitimate, but to find out how people construct and what they look for and what they see. So we're really kind of like, unlike other scholars who are like trying to whittle down and narrow and clarify, we're actually trying to kick up a lot more dust and dirt to kind of see what it looks like in the sunbeams. Cool. Yeah. So I studied at Texas A&M University, Syracuse University, and University of Pittsburgh, where I did my PhD. And I guess my work has been mostly about debate. So the presidential debates have always been a kind of a annoying, kind of a frustrating thing. They're the most watched debates in the world, and they're probably the lowest quality debates that you could possibly create. I don't even know if you could script them that bad. You watch the West Wing debate, it's much better than any actual presidential debate, right? So Aaron Sorkin can script it much better than the reality. I wanted to write a book, and I'd read all the, there's a large number of books about presidential debate. Probably the most well-researched one is Sidney Krause's book, Televised Presidential Debates in Public Policy. And that book has a lot of good information in it. But the theme I saw across all these books was they were all just sort of dragging presidential debates, just be very negative about them. And I was like, well, maybe I could write something that could help. And the book came about because I was doing research with the C-SPAN Institute, which is at Purdue University. and they gave me a small grant to work on using their video archive, which is an extensive video archive of public affairs that a lot of people will go to YouTube. But you should really go to the C-SPAN library, everybody, because you can search for any congressperson, anybody who's held office, and it has a great search engine. It'll show you all the times they spoke on the floor of the Senate or the House, and you can really look at it. It shows their voting record. It's really great. A very valuable resource for a rhetorician, because here's all these speeches, and they don't edit anything. So I looked at that, and my original interest was looking at smaller campaigns, congressional races, and state races, to see how those debates went. And I came up with a rubric of kind of how to look at them. And that rubric I applied to some public writing I did. It was with a group of ex-debate coaches who were doing comments on presidential debates. And I came up with this rubric, and people really liked it. I presented it at the C-SPAN Research Conference. They really were positive about it. So I decided to make it into a book. And the book is like, sure, these are bad, but they're not really going away. They're kind of baked in to the way we do politics. So maybe I can give people a helpful way to make sense of them and to turn them into something positive that you could use to talk about politics at work or with your family or friends, which is getting harder and harder to do. This might be a way to break the ice or put out the fire, whatever your metaphor is, of saying, well, there are these 4 things that candidates do in a debate. I saw them do really well on this one, and that resonates with me because of my experience or my values. And that gives you a way to kind of talk about yourself and why you support a candidate because of something they said in a debate. And so that's what had me write the book. But there's a lot, George Farrar wrote a great book called No Debate, which is just the most savage takedown of the presidential debates. How they're just corporate, horrible, like they're ruining democracy. Would be better off if they never happened. So there's a lot of enemies out there for the presidential debates.
And I think that transitions well to asking, like, how did we end up with this political debate system that we have, and what's broken about it? You said a lot about how a lot of people are criticizing it, and so how do we get here, and why does it not work?
Yeah, so the current presidential debates are really the work of 3 people. I could say burn it down to 3. Well, I don't know if it's 3 people. It's the Senate of the time, but it's mostly Adlai Stevenson is the person who starts it. Adlai Stevenson ran for president in the 1950s, governor of Illinois, and he ran for president 3 times. The 3rd time, he didn't even really get very many votes in the convention. He tried to be like a last-minute nominee in 1960. John F. Kennedy got that nomination. But after that, they asked him if he would write a piece about what he sees the future of presidential campaigning to be. And he was kind of like grumpy about all the things he had to do. He really hated primaries, because he's like, why do I have to go to Wisconsin and drink cranberry juice in front of the media? Like, why do I have to drink orange juice in Florida in front of the media? This is beneath the president. The president should be talking about national issues. It's very Whiggish, right? It's like very Whiggish. Like, we should only be talking about the nation. Who cares about state interests? And so he said, now we have this medium, television, so we should be having regular broadcasts of national concerns. That could be a discussion. They could be a debate. He was kind of ambivalent about what position they take, but he wrote 2 long national newspaper articles, and it was enough to get so much public interest that the Senate convened hearings about how they would go about doing this for the 1960 campaign. Now, the reason they had to convene that is because there's a big, powerful law. It's been really eviscerated in recent years, and I actually don't think the law has a lot of teeth left. I don't know who would enforce it after the last election, but it's Section 315 of the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1934, and it's the equal time doctrine is what it's often called. And what that means is if you're a broadcaster and you sell TV time to a candidate or give it to a candidate, you have to give it to every other filed candidate, not legitimate, but everybody who's on the ballot gets that same amount of time at that price. So very famously, I think Jack Parr had to give 5 or 6 minutes of his show or 10 minutes of his show to some crazy candidate who rode a unicycle and juggled silks. And Jack Parr was mad about it and spoke on the air about how it was a stupid law and he shouldn't have to do this, but NBC had given this time away and da-da-da. So it was something that was enforced at the time. So they had Stevenson testify at the hearings. They had, and the chairman of this was, I think his name is John Pastor, who's the famous Rhode Island senator who also heard Fred Rogers' testimony about PBS. So he's like famous for two big television changes there. But the president of NBC came in and said it would violate NBC's freedom of speech to force them to carry content they didn't want to carry, because they would have to suspend this law to make this possible, to have Nixon and Kennedy do these debates. They decided to suspend it just for that campaign. We get the Kennedy-Nixon debates on television, and then they never took it up again. So the next time we have presidential debates is 1976. And the reason for that is because Jimmy Carter doesn't feel like he has national name recognition. And Gerald Ford is really, really doing poorly in the approval polls. So both of them thought they could benefit from doing televised debates. Now we have the problem with the law again, and Congress is not going to suspend it. So this guy named Newton Minow, who worked for Stevenson and was Kennedy's FCC chair in the Kennedy administration, thought that there was a good legal exemption here, which is if you're covering a bona fide news event, the law doesn't apply. So what if we get a third party to host the debates and then the media can just cover it? So they went to the League of Women Voters and said, would you host this debate? And the League of Women Voters were very eager until they realized that they were like kind of kept out of the room, and the parties negotiated the rules. The parties negotiated everything. The pool cameras were shared by the networks, and the League of Women Voters kind of was like, we don't get a lot of say about this. And later on, when they flexed their muscle and they had a debate in 1980, Carter, Reagan, and then John Anderson, who was an Ohio, kind of a libertarian, independent candidate. They invited all three of them, and Carter said he wouldn't come. And they had the debate anyway with the empty podium. Very bad optics. And of course, Reagan and Anderson are like, we can go on and on about our disagreements, but the guy who really needs to answer the questions chose not to come. Like, it was really, really bad. And so at that point, the parties were like, no more League of Women Voters. So Minow and was he from Illinois? Okay, I thought he was from Ohio. But the League of Women Voters were cut out. Newton Minow created this organization called the Commission on Presidential Debates. It's still around, still exists. And from 1988 on, they've hosted all the debates and put all the debates together. What does that mean? They've given the two parties control over everything that happens through these private documents called Memoranda of Understanding. You can go and look at them in presidential libraries. Some of them, they're very, very big documents that cover everything from the colors that could be worn, the temperature of the room, the colors of the floor, how many cutaway segments you can have. That is like showing when a candidate's speaking, showing the other candidate. And these govern the big national two-party race. So the Commission on Presidential Debates is a fundraising body, really, or an organizational body. They don't have any experts in speech, debate, argument, or politics on it. It's former newsreaders and former members of Congress who serve on it. And they really got, now it's kind of like crazy. Now we have this system where I think it's going to continue to be bad, but, CNN and ABC just decided to do their own debates and violate the law. And who's going to sue them? Who's going to enforce this? I think under the Reagan administration, there were a lot of rulings that happened in the courts that kind of took the teeth out of Section 315. But Jake Tapper and David Muir, they had their debates. No one really said anything, but they followed the same rules as the commission. And the commission had to cancel all their debates and pull back all their debates and all that money. So it really hit the commission hard. And I don't know what the future of the Commission on Presidential Debates is going to be. But Newton Minow is the guy who set that up. And that's why we have the format we have. I call it commission format. And it seems to be well accepted by all the journalists and everybody. And it's not very good. But I think it's going to stick around regardless of who's, pulling the levers behind the debate.
Well, I'm letting that soak in. That was a lot of good history. Mm-hmm. So you also teach a course called Presidential Debate. I was a poli-sci and history undergrad major, so I would love to take that course. What does debate access mean for democratic participation, and what do voters lose when candidates are excluded in the ways that you've just described?
Yeah, there's a lot to say with that. I think a lot of people have what I would call debate fatigue, and they often will watch they'll watch a commission debate to look for a big mistake. They want to see somebody really mess up. There's this term in presidential debates called the gaffe. The gaffe in the debate. I don't know if journalists still use that term, but it used to be used all the time. And that came from Gerald Ford answering a journalist question in a League of Women Voters debate in the 76 debate, where he just denied that there was any such thing as an Iron Curtain. And he was like, no, every Eastern European country sets their own, they have their own government. They're independent of the Soviets. And the journalist is just kind of laughing. And he's like, are you sure that's what you want your answer to be? And he's like, oh, yeah. It's exactly how it is. And it made him look really bad. And so since that time, campaign managers try to avoid having their candidates debate. They don't want the candidates to debate, especially incumbents. They really like, why should incumbents have to debate? They've already proven themselves with the voters. Why should they have to do it? Ford wanted to do it because he was just so down in the polls. But I think that when you have access to debates that are structured properly, you get all kinds of great, you get an opportunity to really identify with different arguments that you see up there, and you see a place for yourself in politics. I think that's the most important thing. Because I think right now people watch it and they're just like, oh, all these people are idiots, and they're just giving their canned responses, and this is exactly what I thought they would say. And it looks kind of like, like a paint by number. And I think a lot of people would rather have kind of an impressionist painting. They'd rather see something like that happening rather than paint by number. Like, yellow is number 7, it's going in number 7. You kind of know what they're going to say. With Trump, it's kind of been upset a little bit because Trump kind of really pushed the commission and showed the commission has no rules. The moderators couldn't stop him talking. They weren't sure if they could turn off a microphone. When the Trump campaign challenged Steve Scully as the moderator for the third debate, they just canceled the third debate. They didn't have a process. So it really showed the Commission on Presidential Debates as kind of this fake organization, just designed to let the parties have a debate and violate federal communications law. Really. I mean, I don't know if I could say it any plainer than that, but I think voters get a lot out of these debates. I just wish they were structured a little bit better. And there's all kinds of alternative ways they could be structured that I think candidates might prefer. Because the least presidential thing, or you guys are running for governor position, the least gubernatorial thing you could do is be expected to stand on a stage for 2 hours with no notes, no consultants, no aides, and answer 50 to 80 2-minute questions about anything from water pollution to education to gerrymandering to media law. Like, that's just not something that chief executives ever do.
Right. Like, you don't want your executive to not consult any facts, data, or people who are experts.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Like, a good state executive or president would fill a room full of experts and be like, okay, brief me on this. You have 8 minutes. Do it. Show me a deck. Let's go. And these people would come to the White House, or they come to the governor's mansion and brief the governor. Everybody would love to do that.
Right. And that's why governors have staffs and like they hire experts to be experts at the things they're experts at. Yeah. Right. And that's a really fascinating point on this, that it is like emulating the worst kind of idea of what debate is. Right.
Yeah. It's like you apply for a job as a teacher. It's like, okay, I want you to cook a 3-course meal. Yeah. And then we'll hire you as a teacher. But it's like there's no relationship, like zero relationship between those two things.
Well, one of the things, I would love to have you come back on the podcast at some point and we can really dive into what these different formats would look like.
Sure.
Because I think there's really good discussion on that. But I want to pivot a little bit. As we mentioned at the beginning, we've known each other from our work with competitive debate for, since the early 2000s, not since the late 90s.
I like that. I like that one better.
Yeah.
It does sound better. You're right.
Early 2000s, right?
Yeah. Earlier this century.
That's right. At the dawn of the century, we were working.
Not last century, right?
That's right. No.
But you've been involved in competitive debate for a long time. What did debate teach you, and what does it do for the students who you work with and who students who get to participate in it?
Yeah, for me, the number one thing was how to feel comfortable and that you belong in a library. That was the number one thing. I remember thinking it was like so great that like I got my mom to take my debate partner and I and a couple of friends to the downtown Fort Worth library to research this great counterplan idea we had. And I remember I was like, oh, I can use this. I know how to use this because of my high school library that I spent so much time in from high school debate. And it just made me comfortable. I could ask librarians for help. I could use the finding aids. I think that's a great thing because public libraries are such a great resource. I think people are rediscovering that through ebooks, through the Libby and things like that, the free ebooks. That's really kind of the thing. But as a research source, it's so much better than Google. And you can find so many things you don't have to spend money on. I think that was the number one thing for me. The second thing was confidence, and that it's okay to share an idea that you didn't realize was bad. People don't have that today because we don't value debate education. People only are like, well, those are the facts. You know, they don't share their opinion or their feeling because it's somehow bad. It's like, I can only share facts. I can only share the true information. We have it backwards. It's like you find the facts and the true information, then you go debate. But debate can really help us shape the gaps in that information. So many times in my class, we'll have a debate, and I always ask, how could this debate have been better? And the students say, I wish we had known this. I wish we knew this. And nobody knows. And that's such a great democratic moment of humility. I think it's just kind of beautiful. And it shows that, oh, well, we don't really know the best answer here. Maybe we could go research this. And I think that's a great thing too. I think another thing is debate gets really interested in policy formation and policy in your community. And you start to think of government as a useful tool for addressing a lot of issues that you might think are bad, instead of just saying, oh, everything's going to hell and you know, like the kind of the cynicism. But I think the cynicism about politics is benefiting somebody. I'm not sure exactly who it is, but to say we have a democracy and then everyone go, yeah, but the companies run everything. Yeah, the millionaires run this kind of cynicism, we can't do anything, is encouraged by not having debate education, which gives you the kind of the confidence to intervene and say, well, what do you think? What do you believe? I don't think that's right. Here's why. And people just don't want to do that because they're afraid of being wrong. I don't think you can be afraid of being wrong in a democracy. I think you kind of have to be like, oh, thanks for proving me wrong. Like kind of a weird kind of, we're not anywhere close to the attitude yet. But I think that was what was good for me in it. And that's why I enjoy teaching it. And I think this was good for students too. They really kind of get into it because they see it's like they have so much more power than just, I just recite the facts. And if they don't believe the facts, they're just like, well, I don't know what's wrong with them. They didn't believe the facts. Or you just say the facts louder. Or you say the facts louder and swear at them. Or you call them an idiot and then say the facts again. This just doesn't work.
Well, your point about debate education and its relation to democracy lands really well, because we're calling for universal debate education in Maryland public schools, elementary through high school, funded statewide. So, you know, Andy founded the Baltimore Urban Debate League middle school program and coached at Towson. What would it mean if every kid in the state had access to that? Does that mean we have like lots of little Andys running around?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be the dream, right? That'd be great. No, I think we'd have a lot more. I think we'd have a much deeper wellspring of public opinion and ideas about how to address the very complex problems, very kinds of wicked, complex disagreement that we have. We'd have a lot more tools and a lot more energy to address those things instead of just saying, well, I'm just not going to talk to Uncle Jim anymore. He's crazy, which is kind of that's our only option now. I'm just not going to talk about politics with that part of the family. And that hurts us on so many different levels to not have those tools, to be able to advocate or to ask questions or to evaluate evidence. Just so powerful. It's great. I always thought if I ran a school, what would be the classes that I would require? And I always thought Latin, chess, debate, and then maybe like now I'm thinking like internet literacy. But those were the three that were the big ones. I always thought typing was good too, because I'm a touch typist, thanks to taking typing in high school. And it saves me so much time because I can just, like I have a book and I want to add a paragraph to something, I can just go. And I think it's an insanely powerful thing. If you want to see the power of debate in making advocates, I think you look to the Stoneman Douglas High School kids who had the horrible shooting, and then a lot of them had debate in the curriculum, not like tournament debating, not like going off for the weekend. They did some of that, but it was just a class everyone had to take. And a lot of those people, like I think her name was Emma Gonzalez, a lot of these people, they became incredible advocates who could speak in front of people and share incredibly well-formed arguments about what needs to be done about gun violence, what needs to be done about school shootings. And they really captured a lot of people's attention and interest, and they became these very important symbols and figures in that public debate. I think that's what you get. You're going to get just more of that multiplied across. And now you have so many students. I see it all the time in New York City, walking out of class and protesting. But wouldn't it be great if we had a few students who could stand up and speak in front of a crowd in a public park and say, here's why we should oppose ICE. Here's why ICE is bad for democracy. Here's why. It would be great to hear those arguments. It's just very powerful. It's just a very powerful proposal. And the interesting thing about it is debate is not expensive. Like, people think it's expensive. It's not. It is not expensive to teach debate the way you guys are proposing how to do it. I think it's great.
And it gets cheaper when more people are doing it. It's only expensive when your neighboring school is not doing it and you have to drive several hundred miles in order to have a competition. But if you have it at every public school and every university and every community college, it's very cheap then, because you can serve a lot of students broken down into pairs of two if you have centralized density of people participating in that activity. When we ran the middle school program, we served almost 1,000 kids in the first year.
Yeah, that's amazing. With
14 schools, right? But that's because teams of two make it so a lot of people can participate. You don't have to make a team. Any team of two can participate. You don't need to have a team of 5 or a team of 10 or a team of 45. 2 kids at a school can make a debate team, or 40 kids at a school can make a debate team. And it costs, there's a difference in price between those two things, but it's not 20 times more to serve 40 kids than it is to serve 2 kids.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like one of the most bang for your buck educational things you could have in the school. And another thing to add on to that, I think debate education is extraordinarily important as AI gets folded into daily life.
Yeah.
I think that becomes a really important firewall against, that's kind of a bad pun, but it's like a good fire break or a dam or some kind of an emergency.
Firewall, that works.
Firewall is good. I know.
Yeah, it actually works, right?
I don't know. It left a bad taste in my mouth, but I think it's good for that, because then people, right now we have people being like, is that AI? Is that AI? But then we're not really sure what to do with that, except either to reject it or accept it. But somebody with debate background could say, well, in this case, this is why AI is inappropriate.
Yeah. And I think
in this case, AI is helpful. And that kind of like moderative approach, I think it's just very powerful, especially with something that is going to be kind of hoisted onto all young people when they enter the workforce. It's just going to be there. I don't think there's anything that's going to stop it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be a great firewall for that. This is another reason to support it.
I did a whole Green Party Eco Action Committee panel about AI, and I think like the ability to say, here's how we should use it, here's how we should be suspicious of it, is directly informed by my debate experience. And I think your point about libraries is really good. Our civic engagement platform calls for doubling the library budget.
That's great.
Along with universal debate education, along with more public debate on public television, along with more participatory forums and things like that. But one of the things that we call for, that I know we've talked about a lot on this show and that you submitted expert testimony for, was HB 101, which is the bill to open publicly funded debate stages to all qualified candidates here in Maryland. And as a scholar of this stuff, what is your take? What does it get right? And is there national significance to a bill like this if we can get it passed in Maryland?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. I think it's an amazing, great idea. I think that there's really nothing to fear here. You have a bunch of third-party candidates. I don't know how many it would be on the stage. You get a
2 or
lot
3
of
most years.
Yeah, 2, 3, maybe 4. It's not that many. And people are kind of scared about, oh, it might be so many people. How would we? I mean, I would just say, look at the primary debates in any presidential year. You have like 12 people up there. And I mean, journalists vary in their ability to control what happens. Like, raise your hand if, I mean, it's not the best metric, but they do at least have some method of controlling the discourse and giving people turn taking and things like that. I think it would be great, because I think what you'll get is pushback from third parties on the two major parties in ways that people would say, well, that's what I would say. So instead of just the boilerplate, I think a lot of people can predict, and they could go on like these online betting platforms and be like, I bet the Democrat says this, and win some money or whatever. And that's kind of the way we look at these debates now. But if you include third parties, you're going to get interesting pushback that actually, if you're a Democrat or Republican strategist, you would want, because it's going to be a moment for the candidate to articulate something in a new way and maybe pick up some votes that way. I don't know. I mean, it's advantageous for everyone. And I think that in this environment where the Commission on Presidential Debates is faltering, and in my opinion is probably done, and you have local media companies setting up debates and doing whatever they want, Maryland could really become a beacon. It could become a real model that a lot of national news might look to. Like, Maryland could kind of set up with this bill the way political debates happen across the country. It's not a far-fetched idea, because if the bill passes and they do it and it works, it looks good, why wouldn't another state do it? And then another and another, and pretty soon you have CNN doing it that way. I think that would be great. I think it would really benefit political discourse in the country in a huge, huge way. And Maryland could be the leader in that. So that's why I submitted the testimony, because I think it's important for the quality of democracy nationally, not just for Maryland, who is obviously going to benefit first, but for everybody. I just think it would be great, because, I mean, Jake Tapper and ABC and CNN, they set up debates that look exactly like the commission debate, even down to like a 15% poll, like this arbitrary number, which has always been an arbitrary number. The Commission on Presidential Debates has no research behind that. They just picked it because they knew Ross Perot couldn't get it, and they didn't want him in the 1996 debates. That's it.
Yeah. And you know, here in Maryland, Maryland Public Television has a 10% threshold for statewide debates for the general election. Well, one of the arguments that we've been making on this bill is that the best third-party performance out since the Reconstruction in Maryland was 3.2% in 1895, and that was a prohibition candidate in 1895. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the best third party gubernatorial performance. There's one other person who's higher than that, and that was the sitting comptroller of Baltimore City, who had been elected to the largest city in the state, ran as an independent candidate in 1966, and he didn't even get 10%. He got like 9.5% or 9.9%. So very close. But in the end, if the MPT rule, Maryland Public Television rule of 10% were applied across the history of governors' races, maybe one person would have ever been in one of their debates. And it's hard to argue, especially in an election like we had last year, where the Democrat beat the Republican by 32 points, and the Libertarian and the Green were closer to the Republican than the Republican was to the Democrat. It's hard to argue that the people of Maryland would not be benefited by hearing the perspectives of the other people on their ballot. And I think we're finding your arguments helpful in convincing legislators of this, and we're finding legislators open to this discussion. And I think the point you make about how Maryland can go first in this is a really important point. And, you know, Davon Love and I are working together on this, and we are not making the case explicitly that Maryland went first on a lot of things that relate to debate, and that he and I were part of those things. But we do think it's an important part of the story. Maryland has a good history of doing solid debate work. And right there in Annapolis, the Naval Academy has had a strong team for years and years, but we've got Townsend and we've got other folks and things like that. And I think Maryland has a real opportunity to go first on this. The next 2 weeks are going to be big on it. So, you know, if any push that we can make on it, we will definitely keep referencing your stuff, and we'll definitely have you come back so we can have more of this conversation about the way that this should be set up, because I think it's a fascinating topic, and I think we have a real opportunity to change the course of history on this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think delegates here listening, or people are listening, you should talk to your delegates about it. Maryland's so safe. Republicans got nothing to lose. Democrats got nothing to lose. Why not experiment a little bit?
Yeah.
Only the voters benefit. The citizens benefit from hearing a lot of diverse voices. We can all agree on that.
Yep.
Totally. Well, let's shift gears a little bit here. And, when you submitted that testimony on the bill, and when Andy invited you on the show, I noticed that you were from St. John's, and, I grew up in New York, and my parents are still there. And so my mom, I guess, whatever algorithm is on her iPhone's news feed, she saw an article about St. John's and some, labor disputes going on right now. So, what's happening with labor and shared governance at St. John's, and, what are faculty dealing with right now?
Yeah. So St. John's University is Catholic private institution. It's been in New York for a very long time. It's one of two universities founded by Bishop John Laughlin. Fordham's the other one, to help with the education of the children of immigrants. So it's been there a long time. It's been socially focused, all that. What's happening now, like for 58 years, we've had labor union, we've had collective bargaining, and we have a collective bargaining agreement. The current president of the university has claimed that negotiating with the union and the collective bargaining agreement is too difficult in this climate to fulfill the Christian mission of the university. And so he has basically said he's not going to recognize the union anymore and not going to recognize the collective bargaining agreement anymore. The administration is trying to set up their own faculty governance, including a faculty senate, which for some reason we never had. I don't know the history of that. We have a university senate, but it's really just death by PowerPoint is really what it is. I was like the elected to be the parliamentarian of it, but there's never any debate, so I never go. It's just a PowerPoint festival. I don't understand it, but it would be nice to have a faculty senate. But the other things are a faculty handbook and all these things to govern. It's unclear what it is that's going to replace collective bargaining with the union. The university has two unions, the Faculty Association, which is local, and we also have an AAUP chapter, American Association of University Professors. The opinion of the unions is that this move is not legal. It's not binding. It's just an attempt to push the union away. And, there's a lot of back and forth right now. It's still quite fresh, but I think that the position of the union is the collective bargaining agreement still governs everything. You can't just wish it away like that. There has to be a process. And I'm not sure where it goes from here, but the collective bargaining agreement, it's one faculty, everybody benefits. You get the voice of the faculty. Like, I don't know how you can have a university with fragmented faculty all negotiating their own contracts, but I can't imagine. I don't know what their alternative is that they have in mind. I guess maybe the alternative is no raises ever again. Maybe that's the alternative. And that's an easy negotiation. But I mean, without a union and without them listening to it, that could be the reality. I don't know what they're planning on doing. It's a weird move. It comes out of the blue from my point of view. I'm not union leadership. I don't speak officially for the AAUP or the Faculty Association, but it's a strange move. And it's very strange to say that the people who are your front porch people, they're like interacting face to face with students, probably more than anyone, are the people who are in the way of fulfilling the mission of the university, is a strange argument to me. I don't know what the evidence is for that. We haven't been shown any evidence for that beside the opinion of the president.
Yeah, it's almost as if the president never learned how to construct an argument and build research in a debate program.
It's not fair, though. I feel bad because it's not fair. He's a philosophy PhD and I have a rhetoric PhD, and there's just no contest.
Yeah.
Like the history of philosophy is like rhetoric's terrible because and they never really can close. Rhetoric's like, oh, well, we like to talk to all kinds of different kinds of people and wiggle room and context changes. And I don't know if he's comfortable with the context changes and negotiation and situation. He's probably not comfortable with that as a philosophy professor. His background.
Well, we hope this ends up working out for you and your fellow faculty, because it does sound like it probably benefits somebody, but not any of the students, faculty, staff, or, people who work there. There's probably somebody who benefits. There's always somebody who benefits.
There's always somebody who benefits. I'm not sure who it is in this case. I do think that from a rhetoric point of view, this is kind of fear appeal stuff, that the university is not going to survive the economic turmoil, the changes in our culture. And so the idea is universities need to lean down and focus on what kind of degrees actually lead to jobs. There's nothing wrong with that, except when you go and look at the evidence, most people are working in a job that has very little to do with their degree.
Yeah.
When you choose a degree, you're choosing an interesting set of problems that you want to play with for 4 years, 5 years, or 6 years. I don't want to, I don't know how long it takes some people to graduate, but you pick an interesting major like theater or sociology or the humanities, and it gives you a set of constructive engagement tools for any problem you find. The ability to articulate it as a sociological problem or a philosophical problem or a economic problem, and then see what comes to bear when you name it that way. And that benefits you, whatever line of work you go into. That's the tool set that companies really want. They don't actually want somebody with a degree in business, right? Because nobody's doing business. They're doing business on a specific thing. There's that great scene from the Rodney Dangerfield movie, Back to School, where he's grilling the economics professor. He's like, no, it matters exactly where we build our factory and exactly what we make. You can't do, and the economics professor is trying to talk in generalities. It's a very funny scene, but it kind of proves the point that comfortable with context, comfortable with the mismatch, comfortable having that confidence to go out and say, hey, I have these abilities. I can solve a problem. Here's how. Liberal arts is really what they should be doing, but I think most universities are pivoting towards this strange kind of business pre-4-year HR screening for some corporation. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So first time robot, right? They're trying to prepare people well for the robot HR staff that are gonna hire, and the robot HR staffs are gonna be like, did you take this course? And it's but you're right. We need that pushback. We need liberal arts. We need debate. Yeah. We need all of this stuff that we've talked about tonight. This has been a great conversation. Well, I'd love to have you come back on the long form version of the podcast and we can get even deeper into it. But how do people follow your work? What can viewers do right now on Debate Access? How do people stay in touch and find your book?
Yeah. Okay. So actually I can give you guys, I have a 20% off coupon that I can give you guys to put in the show notes. It's a QR code. You can snap it, get 20% off the book. That's great. That would be great. I have a YouTube channel. That's probably the best place to follow me. YouTube.com/Steve Llano, all one word. My podcast is there, In the Bin. I've been doing for 18 years off and on now. It's a debate podcast that I started with George Fitzpatrick, who's a St. John's debater, that we started to get the fun of the talking between debate rounds and make that the entire podcast was the vision. But people still listen to it. I can't believe it. It's been a long time. So that's on there. And then I also have a Substack like everybody else, sophisticsteve.substack.com. I post my thoughts on there from time to time. And that's it. And I have a page on academia.edu, which is all my published scholarly work. That's pretty good if you have insomnia. Works like a charm. But I think for Debate Access, anybody who's in Maryland listening to this, I think, contact your delegate and say, I'd love to hear some different views in the debates. I think the debates are really important. And I think it would be great to have some third parties up there. When you look at European presidential debates, they have all these different parties. It makes the debates more engaging and more interesting. And if you are a committed Democrat or Republican, it makes you even more excited to defend your party. So I think it's great for everybody. That's what I would say.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity to break this down with you. I really appreciate the wisdom that you're bringing to this. It's not just we want to be included in the debates because it benefits us. It's we want to be included in the debate because we want to shift the culture in a way that allows this type of thing to be regular and to allow our politics to have good civic engagement and to allow people to hear fully formed ideas. And I appreciate the work that you have done in order to provide an intellectual basis for us to make this argument. It has been helpful when we're talking to legislators. It has been helpful for me to think think about. And this discussion, I think, has opened up my way of thinking about it even more than I already was. And I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you on it. Anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
I just say it was my pleasure being here. Thank you guys, and go green.